Hi, my name is Wade Simmons of Amber Education Services, and this video is intended to give a person some background and some thought around the idea of becoming self-employed as a career option. Choosing small business or self-employment as a career path as opposed to finding employment brings with it a number of factors that we want to consider. And so we want to run through a bit of a list here in this video to give you some food for thought to take away and give consideration to before you want to take the leap or make the leap into the idea of becoming your own business owner. There's no doubt that we can talk about the positives, and we hear all kinds of these things in various media, whether it's the ability to set your own schedule, to do the work that you love, to have all kinds of freedom, and of course, to make lots of money if that should be the case. But before we get to all of that, we want to first take a look at some of the challenges that are typically going to arise for many of the sort of small business ideas that I have seen in my career working in this industry. To start with, one of the first things for us to think about is the notion that this business, if it's a career choice, needs to be one which we can get up and running relatively quickly and have it make us a living, have it earn us a living in the time that we have resources in order to stretch things out. The problem with this is that the demand for income, right, personally, is such that this business cannot just percolate away for years or as a bit of a side hustle. It in fact has to get to a point where revenue is such that we can draw a living wage from it. And that's not an easy thing to do in a short time frame, often described perhaps as a year or less. One of the real challenges that people face in starting businesses is the notion that their market research hasn't really borne fruit, hasn't really proved out to be true. And some of the things that we have certainly observed over time is the idea that we get off to a much slower start in our businesses than we were expecting. And this is because the people that we spoke to under the heading of market research, in fact, weren't being completely honest or weren't being truthful with us. And rather were saying nice things, and they were being kind and they were being supportive, but in fact didn't really intend to do business with us, to buy from us. And so in the research that we do, anything short of actual test marketing, sort of proving that concept, is only as good as the people that are responding. And there's no doubt when it comes to market research, if I can only do one thing, it would be to ask people to criticize my idea. So I appreciate that they like that I'm going to become self-employed and they may really like my service or my product, but I don't need that information. What I need is what's wrong with this. And so quite often, if I can task people with criticizing my ideas, if I can urge them to be honest without repercussion, then maybe I can start to get some honest answers from them. So be careful in your market research, because that's going to come to bear in those first few months of launching your business. And again, we observe on a very regular basis that people have simply a much slower start than they were expecting. In order to achieve this relatively quick ascension to profitability, we want to take a look at business ideas that have few barriers to launching. So not a lot of requirements around tickets or licenses or any education to be accomplished. Even things like leasehold improvements or getting permission from certain boards or bodies or cities in order to run such a business can really drag out the timeline. So make sure that whatever the barriers to entry are for the idea that you have in mind, that they aren't going to use up all of your time and resources waiting for that approval. Certainly the idea of low startup costs and low monthly expenses is a much easier kind of business to accomplish. And usually these are service businesses that we're talking about. On the flip side though, what's challenging about a service business is that there are only so many hours in the day that we can bill for. And because of that, there is only a limit, or there's a cap on how much money we can expect to make from this company. If we truly want to scale something, then we've got to find a way to come up with something which can be reproduced many, many times over, so that we are always selling something to somebody somewhere. But if it's just our hourly rate times 5, 6, 7 hours a day, then very clearly there's a limit again on how much this business can expect. Are we well suited to being self-employed? And I appreciate that we may have a passion for our industry, we may love what we do, and so on. But are you equally excited about the business itself, running the company. So this would involve things like the bookkeeping and the finances, the forward thinking, the planning, the visioning of your business. So can you imagine working all day doing that task that you love to do and then being finished and coming home and spending some time reviewing the numbers, right? Going through the income statement and the balance sheet, getting a report back maybe from a bookkeeper or an accountant and wanting to review that and compare that to the information that you received last month and last year. So in becoming self-employed, quite often we want to make sure that we're not just excited about the work, but we're excited about being managers. And having both skill sets is a challenge at times, or something which we need to learn and grow with the business at the same time. But we can't abdicate our responsibility by just letting the business run itself. And as long as there's money in the bank account, we're happy. That can be challenging, and we can quite often get ourselves into difficulty if we go that way. Speaking of money, right, in order to launch a business again in this relative fast track kind of thinking, we're going to need to be able to invest in the company. We're going to face some basic startup costs within reason no matter what we start, but we're also going to need to have the money so that we can speed the business along. So through marketing and advertising. So we need to be able to put some fuel on the fire, if you will, so that we can get things ramped up in a relatively short order. So do you have the finances, or can you access the finances in order to start a business? My guess would be that in many cases we're talking about needing to have $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, something like that, for the most simple of home-based services. And of course, if we're talking about products and leasing space and all kinds of things, then quickly those numbers begin to ramp up into that $10,000 to perhaps $20,000 mark. If you think about how much money your business has to make in order to earn you a living, then reasonably, if we're looking for a salary of something like $4,000 to $5,000 a month, then our service business at charging $50 an hour has got to be billing out for at least 100 hours a month, maybe more than that. So how reasonable is that for what you have in mind? And if you're selling a product where the markup might be something like 100%, where the cost of the product is half of the sale price, right? Then we start talking about having to do sales of $10,000 to $12,000, maybe $15,000 a month, so that we can pay for the company expenses and still draw that livable wage for ourselves. So if you think about your business idea from the perspective of making a living, and you start doing the math on a gross amount of revenue like $5,000 for a service and $10,000 for a product, then reasonably, is there demand out there for what you have in mind? Those steps that I mentioned in terms of starting your business might begin with something like choosing your company structure. So we need to decide between a proprietorship and a limited company. And there's pros and cons to each, and we can certainly delve into those. But the proprietorship is inexpensive, perhaps costing us something around $80 to set up. The limited company, more expensive, and if we do it ourselves, costing us probably $500. If we get a lawyer or someone to do it for us, probably costing us $2,500. But nonetheless, we've got to form that company. We need a business license in most areas, so we're talking about at least $100 per jurisdiction that we're going to do business in. From there, perhaps we need some insurance. Changing the insurance on our vehicle is going to cost us about $100. We need some insurance reasonably over our location, probably $300 to $500. And our tools and equipment and things, probably getting up into the, in total, $800 a year range. And then on top of that, some liability coverage in case somebody is simply accidentally harmed, or in case we're holding ourselves out as a professional and we need something like errors and omissions or professional liability. And with those kinds of insurances, we're talking about another, say, $1,500 to a couple $1,000s a month. A year. What you might want to focus on is whether or not you can join an industry or join an association through which you can get far lower premiums and perhaps better coverages. But nonetheless, we've got to take a look at the topic of insurance. From there, perhaps we need some basic tools and equipment, a desk, a chair, a filing cabinet, a computer, a phone, and then maybe the tools to actually do the work. And so you can see if we work our way through this list, we start getting into the hundreds and into the thousands of dollars in order to set things up. From there, our branding, right? So a business card, maybe a website, social media in different forms. We can do some of these things ourselves, but do we have that skill? Are we a marketing person as well as a business person, as well as doing the work that we love, right? That list of skills begins to layer on. So maybe we're going to contract out some of this work, but then again, we're talking about hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, to accomplish some of these things. Just rough numbers, a website developer is probably looking at an easy couple $1,000s to create a basic website. A graphic artist probably wanting hundreds, if not a couple $1,000s again for the creation of our branding. So it can certainly add up depending upon how much of this work we can do ourselves and how reasonable it is for us to do it versus contracting it out. So when you think about the idea of becoming self-employed and the notion that there's a sense of urgency around getting this business up to a level where it can earn us a living, you want to consider not just the positives, which again, as I say, we hear about all the time, but the challenges that go along with it as well. So you want to think about a model of business, again, with those few barriers to beginning, to those low costs to start up, those low costs to maintain. You want to self-assess and make sure that you are in fact the right person to not just do the work, but to run the company. Make sure that reasonably you can access a certain amount of money, which is going to be necessary to start this business, right? And as you walk your way through those steps, don't discount the validity of surrounding yourself with good people, right? People who are experts in their fields, so that you can get this business up to that point all the quicker. And lastly, as a thought, right? Most businesses that can get off to that quick success are solving a problem, right? There's a need or there's a demand in the marketplace for something new or something different, right? So if you think about your business from the perspective of what problem is it solving, then how would you answer that question? And when you decide what it is that your business can do, what problem it can fix, then realize that what you're asking is for customers to either try something new or to switch from a current provider of that product or service to you. And getting that message across that there's a great reason to try something new or to make a switch will take that investment of time and energy, and in some cases money, and we need to be patient with the business. We need to give it the time to sort of take root and to grow and mature. But all the while, that's got to be measured in weeks and months, because if it's going to take years, then choosing self-employment as a career option might be too much of a slow boil. Maybe we need something faster. So critically analyze this idea that you have in mind. Consider some of these thoughts and determine whether or not the idea of becoming self-employed is the right next career move for you. I hope you found this video to be helpful. My name again is Wade Simmons of Amber Education Services, and thank you very much for your time.